Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Embodied. I hope you're well. This season, I have conversations around the topic of trust. And in this episode, I am speaking with my dear friend and mentor, innovative educator and spiritual guide, Nancy Dancing Light Sherwood. Nancy's work revolves around the embodiment of consciousness through light that moves into form with dance, sound, and color, and seen by the third eye. These transmissions awaken creativity and action here on Gaia so that we can dance our personal, collective, and changing story of love and great mystery in the universe. Nancy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for a while now. First of all, I adore you and as a person, and I adore your work as a spiritual guide. And can I call you a shaman? You didn't have that in your bio, but is that a term you would use to describe yourself?
Yeah. That's a good one.
What would be your definition of shaman, if you don't mind me asking?
To me, a shaman goes into other realities and brings back guidance and wisdom beyond my own ego that I couldn't imagine with just my personality. But it also involves serving a community as well. I could be doing it by myself and it wouldn't be the same as serving.
That's beautiful. So tapping into a different reality, another dimension, bringing back information with the intention of serving a community. Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. So I've met you, I believe, back in 2007. And I'm just going to tell our listeners a little bit about my first experience with you. So I was organizing the Ideas Festival, which was my first big event where I had multiple speakers. And you came as a participant, and someone introduced me as this local, powerful, authentic shaman who works with a lot of integrity and is the real deal, as people would say.
Yeah.
Which I think, in this world, discernment is so important. Like when you hear people say like, no, this is someone who just operates with so much integrity. And I thought to myself, like, she's coming as a participant, like everything I hear about her, she should be a presenter in my event. And then you said to me, I'm here because I love being at the beginning of things. Do you remember what you saw or felt? Because you were at the beginning of me.
In my life, it seems I've been able to see people's souls very effortlessly, see into them. And I saw you as a very old soul, and also was inspired by your creativity because I recognized somebody, that had that same approach to, okay, so this is interesting, let's see what we can make of it. And then other people too, because you invited other people. So it kind of hit on a lot of bells and of recognition. I recognize you, Anne. We've been together before. Yeah. And it doesn't have an age in that sense.
Yeah.
Ageless.
I mean, at the time, I think I was pregnant with my second child, and I definitely was at the beginning of my conscious path.
Right.
And so I just remember being quite mesmerized by you. So I invited you to come to the next Ideas Festival the year after, where you presented. You did a presentation.
Yeah.
And that was my first time witnessing your work. And for the listener, I'm going to explain a little bit what that looks like. So there was a room full of participants, and Nancy would go around the room and then stop in front of a person. So let's say it was my turn. So stop in front of me. And then through dancing and embodying the energy of the moment. This is how I saw it, and then you can clarify it after. Embodying the energy of the moment and the energy of me, you started to dance what you felt, what you knew to be true about our communication and about my higher self, and in front of everyone else. And at the time, I still didn't graduate from my PhD, so I was very much in my intellect. And I remember the feeling of being seen for the very first time as who I really am, with a level of intimacy and vulnerability that I had never experienced before. So being seen by you in front of everyone, it was like an awakening to myself. But I want to point out the vulnerability and the intimacy, because I think at that point in my life, I hadn't felt that intimate with myself before. Does that make sense?
That does. And I'm sure it can be shocking. But the invitation I felt was to be as honest and open in myself, rather than to, couch it in societal terms and titles and so on. It was a non-linear thing. And so you've described it really well. Yeah. And I don't know if you felt a little bit naked, but that was, it's okay to be naked is what I was saying, it was saying yourself.
Yes, exactly. And that is the moment, like, I fell in love with you and in love with your work because of that non-compromising showing up as who you are, no matter those societal construct. And because of that non-negotiation with yourself, the power of awakening is huge in your presence. And from that moment on, is like, I want more Nancy in my life. I want to be able to show up like she shows up for herself. Yeah. I'm curious. Actually, let me just go back even a little more. So then after that, we started working a little bit together, and I was part of a group of 12 grandmothers that, and it was led by you and your vision of organizing a gathering of shamans from all around the world. And it was called a shamanic conversion. And there was shamans from all around the world that came to Nova Scotia and shared their medicine and shared their gifts and their vision for a better world. And I remember those 5 days at Oceanstone. I believe that was 2009 or something like that, maybe. And those 5 days at Oceanstone just feel like we were in another time. Like we were just in another place and time, doing work that was ancient, that we'd done before together, and at the same time was very needed for the present moment. Yeah. So my first question to you is, I'd like for you to go back to like when you were young. Like, have you always had this ability to see other people's soul and express what is needed in the moment? Like the work that you do, have you always had that capacity and that ability?
I think that really everybody does, but for me, it was part of the challenge of growing up, like so many people, where I have to hide myself to be safe. So I certainly hid some away. I had some encouragement from some people in my childhood, and I frightened other people because let's say, sometimes my mom would ask me to tell if the milk's going off because I could smell it ahead of everybody, But other times saying, Mom, the house is on fire. And she's like, no, it isn't. It can't be. Your father went upstairs and checked after the lightning struck. This really happened. And I saw the lightning come out of the plugs in the walls under my brother's chair and everything. But I knew the house was on fire. And finally, I frightened my mother enough that we went next door. And then it was coming out from under the eaves of the house. It was a good thing we were next door. But it was that push-pull for my poor mother. She just was, like, what do I do with this kid?
Yeah.
And she had her own ways of feeling like it's too much. It's too much. So I had to learn to negotiate that. And it wasn't always easy, but I think, things happened. For instance, I had EEG. The first EEG scared me, all the lights flashing. And the second one, I journeyed. It's a test on your brain with, I don't know the official electrosneptic. Anyway, it was to check my brain, and you see all these flashing lights, but I didn't know my nature was to follow those lights and be the light with it, dance with it. So the second time they took the test, I actually, in my mind, danced with the light. I was about, how old was I? In my early 20s then. So sometimes I'd have something shocking happen that actually I went with it instead of resisting it. And I had lots of fear of going crazy, very, very fear, like, oh man, like, I'm going to be scary. And because some of this work is, you have to be fierce as well as tender. It's like working within our duality society, you think you have to choose, but the fierceness is necessary because it's part of nature. Nature can be fierce. It can be gentle. And so accepting all of what nature has to offer was accepting my own nature. And that's been a journey. And then when I had a shamanic, I did TM and different, modalities. And then I got into women visiting me at some sea caves, and always the landscape is part of it too, because I grew up near Niagara Falls. That's huge energy. I grew up, was born near Minas Basin, huge energy. So this place had huge energy, and then these three women showed up looking for me, and actually my husband as well, but they gave me this healing that I thought I would die. Same thing, all these flashing lights and like strange things. So by just surrendering to it, there's part of me was reborn that I had suppressed. And fortunately, I've been a shaman in other lifetimes. So that was, my guides also told me that, so that I was able to accept this more easily. And it, again, nonverbal. And it was like being wired like a baby. First you get your head moves around and the hands and the feet will come last when you walk. So then I was dancing because the chakras in the feet connect to the earth. And so the energy started coming up from the earth and down from the sky and meeting at the heart. So then my hands were affected into healing modality. But getting used to this, I kept looking for someone like me. And I was, I had people, again, scared of me, nervous of me, because there was no context. Mm-hmm. There was no context for this. So I tried to do things with some friends. And finally I went overseas to Findhorn in Scotland. And I took Carolyn Mace's course, and I got to the crown chakra, and somebody came in from England and they said, oh, I need a soul retrieval. I never did a soul retrieval before in this lifetime. But I accepted. She gave me tobacco. I told Carolyn, I said, I've been asked for soul retrieval. She asked her guides, and she said, yeah, go for it. So I danced for the rest of the session. And I didn't just do that woman, I did the room. And so my model became of teaching was Carolyn Mace checked in with her guides, and she didn't follow the lesson plan if it didn't go with what was actually happening in the moment. So it kind of gave me permission. I can do this too, because I had been artistic and a creator. I sing and, so on. But this one was about the real embodiment in the moment that we need now on the planet, and practicing that because we're in these times we're in. And so it was preparation for me, then preparation for people. And do you want me to go on with this
Well,
piece,
I
or?
didn't know this story.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Like I didn't know that you had studied with Carolyn Miss, and that was a turning point. It's almost like a permission, right?
Yeah.
Someone saw you and said, you go
Yeah.
and do that.
You go.
Because
Yeah.
this is a context in which this can live.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Because I needed to go some, like you, and your spirit sought out that encounter with me, in a sense.
Yep.
Well, I went there not knowing what would happen, and came home with more courage to do it.
Yeah.
And again, trying to find a context for that was, I have, done things with First Nations, and then First Nations said, leader out west, who said, go home and find your people more, your ancestors, and go to the lands where the settlers came from to connect with the land. And in the most recent time, I had a lot of things happen that were very, very traumatic. Just like you had the car accident, I carried a lot of trauma from my past, and had a chance in the last couple of years to encounter it again. It wasn't fun. It involved a lot of grief, of tearing up of my life. I moved how many times this year? And that's what I wrote to you, was, that I'm coming out of that now. So in a way, you're inviting me to come out again, but changed again in a way that I couldn't have anticipated. I couldn't have anticipated there would be so personal, that I would need to really question everything all over again and go through.
That's a very important point to make, because a lot of our listeners would feel like, why am I in chaos again? Like, I've done so much work on myself.
Yes.
Why is it so hard again? And just to hear that from you, who dedicated her life to growing in this way, saying, hey, just a couple years ago again, like, was thrown into having to reassess my identity.
Yeah, from chaos.
From chaos. Exactly.
Yeah.
Always a precursor, or like an indicator that some new layer of awareness and revelation is around the corner. But it doesn't feel like it. And I think it's reassuring, is what I'm trying to say, to hear you say that. And I'm sure listeners would love to. It's like, okay, this is the way. It's not I get there and I'm done. This is the way.
Exactly. Yeah. And then to deepen the trust in myself again, you were talking about trust, it's like, did spirit abandon me? Yeah. Because all these things just flew away out of my life that I had, and connections and relationships and place and so on. And so it was to deepen that. And I mean, it could be discouraging to say, well, you don't just arrive and you stay there forever, but it's the growth. Yeah. If the movement is part of me. If I'm not moving and changing and encountering, then I'm starting to decline. I'm starting to say, oh, it's about my age, and I'm just going to fold up and sit on the couch, and give up. And everybody has that opportunity, right? You could just distract yourself forever, entertain yourself forever. The world's full of it. But I change it from, and it's an existential crisis to it's an existential opportunity. And when I say everybody has a chance to make these choices. It's not all the same choices. We're unique in ourselves, but our abilities to be creators, it's there in our essence, in our soul. And the soul calls that.
So
Yeah.
it comes up as an existential crisis, but it's an existential
Opportunity, yeah.
every single time. I
Yeah.
love how you said that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Nancy, in the intro, we mentioned that that you move light into form with dance, sound, and color, and then beside color, it says like seen by the third eye.
That's right.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about what that means, and is it related to some people have more clairvoyance, more clairsentience, more omniscience? Like what is?
Well,
Can
this
you
is
tell me more
where,
about that?
yeah, this is where the educator in me comes forward. I started my life by teaching my little brother how to read, and you have to trick him into reading by making up a story, and he's got his ego and his alter ego, and so I learned to teach through playing, but I also learned to teach people who are of neurodiverse, and say, okay, which thing will help them? The touch? Would it be the sound? Would it be through stories, or would it be through an analysis? So with those kinds of modalities, that's why the movement goes back to one of our most ancient ways of interpreting reality, is within ourselves, and to move, and to go back to origins of creation, with sentient beings that don't have the same language as us, or because it's through the heart. So if someone's excited and someone's happy to be learning, they learn so much more through the playful way of approaching imagination than if they're just reached, like you said, intellectually. I don't think any of us have anything wrong with our intellect, but that's only one way of learning. One, we've hear about emotional IQ too, right? That's the part of being human, this challenge of being human, because our hearts can always be broken, and then we're going to say, okay, I'm just not going to love anymore. I'm just going to shut down. I'm going to, get into my head. And I think I've gone way off now, but it's okay.
It's okay. It makes all the sense.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, because it is the idea that you can see through the third eye. And I think that some people can see colors and can see, but some other people can't. And they might more feel, or they might.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all their senses extended, like you said. If you're a visual person, maybe you will see more, like they call it the aura. You see someone's aura moving. That's their light. Or if you journey, and some people worry, oh, I didn't see a movie. But how did you feel in your body when you journeyed? Did you reach some understanding? The one that's hardest to prove is I just know.
Yes.
I just know. And so my clients come to me, well, I just know, I can't explain it. Well, that's hard to prove, but that's another direct transmission. Some people hear a message.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
You
got it.
That's mine. So for me, it's knowing.
Okay.
So I think 6 or 7 years ago, I went to North Caicos, and there was an ancient cave there. And when you walked in, there was a palpable energy. So I could feel the energy. And then I felt called to put my forehead on this beautiful rock that looked like a little god, almost like just like bowing down. And so I put my forehead, and as soon as I put my forehead, I could feel a lot of energy moving through me. And I knew that it was important, but I didn't know the details. And I trusted that. And that moment for me was a turning point, because I allowed myself to not understand the details because I didn't
Yes.
see anything, I didn't hear anything.
Right.
I just knew the sacredness of what just happened and that it would reveal itself all in time. And I do remember that moment as being a time where I started to trust that as opposed to be hard on myself. Oh, I think it should have looked like that. Like I should have seen something, or I should have known something quite clearly. Um, yeah. So I think as people develop their gifts, and like you said, we're all a little shaman, right? We all
Yeah.
have that ability and that capacity. It's about trusting how the subjective experience of how light and information passes through you. And because a lot of us haven't been told or reassured or, you know, supported
Important. Yeah. Yeah.
in our childhood,
Right.
it's a relearning of how to trust that, and it can be so foreign. Just even like feeling the energy moving through us, we can think, "Oh, I'm having anxiety," for example, when it's
Yeah.
actually energy moving.
Yeah. Excitement. Life.
Life. I'm
Yeah.
alive. I'm
And
fully
it
alive.
does frighten some people because it's so much.
Mhm.
I've seen people have so much, they've asked for it, and when it actually happens, they back off a bit because they're like, that's too much. But it's actually what was needed, and that's the trust part. I had the experience I needed. And shamanism is the oldest practice of humans, and which is another reason I'm grateful I was able to express it in this lifetime, because there's many paths where all this coming, but this one had the umbrella over the whole world, was shamanic at one point. So it's quite ancient and quite full of that knowing you're talking about. It's programmed right in the rocks. It's programmed right in the land that we walk on. Yeah.
Can we talk about that at the time when shamanism the earth was enveloped in that kind of way? You said it differently, but that just reminded me of our conversation through email around Mount Kalish,
Right. Yeah.
and a time when there was that, you know, way
Yeah.
of being.
Yeah. So you can go back 50,000 years, or you can go back 10,000 years, and it was still operating before the real empires came up. Before people organized into empires, it sort of hunter-gatherer times encouraged it because people shape-shifted into the animals that they were relating to when they were hunting. They could see the animals before they saw them with their regular eye.
Wow.
And there's still people in the deserts in, like, say, Saudi Arabia or whatever, that live nomadic lives that still know you're coming way before you get there. They can feel it. And so it was a survival thing in a way, but it also was when people, I feel they must have taken that spirit was part of. It's not a secular world. You think about Stonehenge and you think about the places that were built as monumental places where people lived right among their monuments and had a reference point on that landscape. So we have evidence now of, like I said, going back now to in the caves where, like you were. So we're talking a long time before even agriculture came along. And for some reason, we need this now. We need this ancient knowing to face the future. It's a spiritual technology. We have other kinds of technology, but it really is technology. And if you learn it, the cosmic laws. Yeah.
And do you get a sense that we that our souls are ready to activate a body that can live the way we used to in those times, like that there's a support from consciousness, from Gaia, from where we're going. You get a sense of like also that there's a memory
Mm-hmm.
that can be awakened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the remembering, again, if we're talking about our people that are listening today, all of us have that inside of us somewhere. And so if that memory can wake up, we have access to other dimensions, other ways of looking at what's going on in life outside of the conditioning we've all received. We've all been conditioned, and we live where we live and the way we live, and we can't go backwards into being tribes the same way. We've been very individualized. So the new challenge to me is you're individual as a snowflake, but you are part of this whole storm, of consciousness. So it's like, how do I maintain my individual point of view and also relate to I'm part of something so big. It's so sacred. It's so amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what is the role of going to a place on the planet that you're called to when it comes to awakening that remembering? Like you've done that quite a bit. You've traveled to places where you were able to remember even more because of the energy of the land.
Yeah.
How could you explain that to our listeners, like the importance of that?
It could be personal, like your own DNA, your own culture. So you go back through time that way through your ancestors, because the ancestors, they're listening to us right now. They're just part of it and trying to encourage us. But then our far distant ancestors, even before people had last names, are those people like I was talking about in ancient times. And so we have the sort of more family related places where our ancestors came, but we also have the creation, and that we were part of the stars. We are star beings that have, well, my belief is we agreed to come here, even if we can't remember when we made the contract. And what you said, that's a soul contract. And I probably take something from Carolyn Mason that's what she talks about. And so when the work is aligning the body and the soul, the more healthy we are. If the body and soul get out of alignment, we get illness, we get symptoms, because we're not in alignment enough. And then connecting to the land is even more alignment. So we might go to a place we were in a past life, in a different culture, because we've all been here many, many times. The old souls. And there's new souls being sent in too.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be embodied.
Can you tell me more about what you mean by we're from the stars?
Well, we are made of stardust, literally, like the song. And it means that part of us has that potential for creativity, because the stars were all created at the same time. But there's pieces of us that took human form. And so the memory of, the way I see it with some people is I actually see a star in the third eye when I meet them, and usually those people are more aware of that. Again, it doesn't mean everybody doesn't have that origin, but some people right now will be more aware of that star origin. And as humans, we join, of course, heaven and earth. The Chinese said that in their philosophy, thousands of years ago.
How would someone be aware of their star origin? Like how would that manifest for someone or present itself?
Again, depending on the practice, if you, let's say it's shamanic journeying, you may talk to the star beings. You may hear them give you messages. You may be just have that awareness because there's something, like it feels like there's something more, and that we're not limited. We're not, not the first person to say we're more scared of our power than, our limitations even. So it's, to me, that comes, like you said, those different abilities that we have from our guides and our allies, and including the star beings. Space, some people call them space brothers or sisters,
Yes.
And you see some of the old caves, some of the drawings look like the beings are from out of space.
Yeah.
And it's been said that some of those stone circles, if the space beings are tuning in, they look from outside the earth and see the pattern, and they're drawn to where the people are invoking the stars.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So it is like what I noticed is, so for me, the call to Kauai, which was that ancient civilization of Lemuria, which feels like it was my first ancestor, light ancestor.
Right.
The call was undeniable. Like it just keeps pulling you home, home. And the way that it showed up for me is just a desire to go back. And then when I'm there, just knowing how the integrity of soul, body, and land, like the alignment of soul, body, and land, is just like nowhere else in the world for me so far, because I haven't been everywhere, obviously. But and so I like that you share that, because I think for our listeners it's important to know that that is absolutely a self-trust thing. Like no one's going to say, hey, this is where you're from. This is what you'll remember. This is how it's going to feel. But it's a journey of trusting the pull and recognizing that it is a subjective experience and no one else is going to trust it for you. It has to be.
That's your responsibility. Yeah, that's another thing, is taking responsibility for that, your choice, and whatever consequence. And you might not see the outcome. We're dealing with a lot of unknown right now, and around the world, and it's like, step out into that unknown, and you'll get signs of the next place to go. But like Hawaii particularly, after I went there, I realized is particularly changing all the time. All the elements are changing. It's the most moving piece of land with the volcanoes and sea, and it's really energetic. Yeah.
And you are right. It is different every time I go. Yet this core that is the same. Yeah. That's beautiful. I'd love to talk about, teachers, because, when the feeling I have around you, and I do call you a mentor, I feel, every time I'm in your presence, I learn so much, even though you're not overtly teaching. I learn so much by your presence. And there's a lot of teachers out there. And for me, the resonance has to do with integrity and the embodiment of what you teach, and really being 2 feet on the path that you're talking about. And I see that, like, I feel that in you so much, so strongly. And, I feel the same way about Prune Harris, right? So Prune is a mutual friend, but she's been in your world a lot more than in mine. And there's just a deep level of trust when you're around someone who, with every fiber of their being, are there to support the greater good, and that's the intention. That's the only intention. There's no, there's no dissonance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you found that on your path? This discernment, how, like, the importance of the discernment when it comes to teachers, because I do also know that about Carolyn Miss, like meeting her a few times, that she's also someone with a high level of integrity that I would absolutely trust. What has been your experience with that?
Well, I've been fortunate for whatever reason. Again, I knew when I met her that the energy she was channeling was equally important to the words. And I wouldn't have described it in those days like that, but that I realized that's the energy, and that like you use the word resonate. And so I know when someone is not my teacher. They might make a wonderful teacher for somebody else, but I know, okay, that's not my teacher. And it doesn't mean I have nothing to learn from that person, but there is a difference. And like I think of Sundance Chief out west. I knew I was in the right place with the right person, with the compassion as well as the practice. And so certain things happened when I arrived on the land in a way that, and then of course I found out that I had been Blackfoot another time, and it's a star mythology. Like you think of the prairies with all the stars, you know, and it's this funny thing about friend of mine's is related to a woman who's a politician in Alberta, and the Blackfoot made her this beautiful coat, and it was too big for her. She's just petite. So my friend gave to me, and here I am with this coat that comes from the people that I danced with, right? So then I'm thinking, oh, this is not an accident. You know, I'm getting this indirectly, but that's the way it's meant to be, and that's the way those things happen. And so I felt like a protection, or, good for you, like, kind of thing like that. Yeah. So I watched those things, and like I said, they're there for everybody. It's to notice. We're trained not to notice. We're trained to notice other things. So we miss out on what's really happening. And like I said, I've been fortunate to meet some people with a lot of integrity that I could say, oh yeah, this person, they're going to maybe make me do something tough, or I don't like it, but I'm going to benefit from being in their presence and following what they ask me to do, right? And so that seems to be something I know.
Something you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, it's learning to discern that difference. Because if you grew up where in a space where, and I love how you said it earlier, Nancy, like that, and you could repeat it if you'd like. I'd like for you to repeat it. Actually, it's like when you met Carolyn, like her words matched her energy, or how did you say it?
Well, the energy was at least important as her words, because she is articulate.
Yes.
And she can be really very direct, like, get your hands off your third chakra, that kind of stuff. But it's like, she doesn't say it out of, she thinks she's better than other people. She's pushing you around. She's trying to wake you up. And so she picks the method. And sometimes it's gentle, and sometimes it's not, because she has to be fierce with her presentation. And in an era when that wasn't so accepted by women's behavior. So we needed some outspoken women in that field. And she went to a shaman as well. You know, it's named Agartha, as a psychic, along her path. So she had to prove herself in both worlds. When she was with the doctor, her diagnosis had to be very accurate with him, that she was channeling by going to the Akashic records. And when my husband was in Scotland and at a conference at Findhorn called The Beauty of Surprise, she said, I know someone who knows you. I know you're connected to someone that I've met. And it's from Canada, right? So she sensed this without any tags around it. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. And you have to be, I think you have to be, call on your courage for this.
Yes.
You know, being this outspoken. She hasn't had it easy every day.
No, she's bold. She's bold, and she can come off a little bit aggressive sometimes.
Yep.
But my teacher Louise Lebrun was the exact same way, and to me, that was how I needed it. Like, I don't know if it's because I'm Capricorn and I'm stubborn,
Yeah.
but I needed someone who was going to, like, short of yell
Yeah.
at me to wake up.
That's great.
Which is so strange because if, you know, my style is pretty soft. You know, I can definitely say things that someone might not want to hear, but I'll say it in a very soft way and in a very like, you're so loved in this moment, like, you know. But that's not the kind of teacher I needed at the beginning of my path. I needed some fire. So I absolutely get that. What I was saying earlier is this, like, you were able to know that there was this, like, her words, her energy was as important of her words, or her words were as important as her energy. As children, a lot of us, like, have unlearned this ability to know the resonance because adults around us, their words did not match their energy. And, you know, and I remember at 4 years old, like, my grandfather was dying in the hospital, and people were saying words that did not reflect how they were actually feeling. And they were also putting words to what he was going through, but that's not at all what he was feeling, because I sense his energy as well. And the way I described it at the time is, like, thinking people are lying. And so then you learn the language of this lie.
Right.
And then you become versed in that lie. And then you forget what that beautiful resonance feels like and looks like. And then I think that's why a lot of us go to the wrong teachers for a long time.
Well, I think you're right about the learning to just trust yourself, because you don't want to, you feel you can't afford to distrust your caregivers because your life depends on it. I really had the feeling, and one of my brothers has said with me the same thing. We were terrified sometimes. So then when you're very vigilant, and then as a woman, I was very socialized, the opportunity that I referred to just more recently was to uncover some of the, even though I've done so much work on myself, to uncover some of where more of that. And that's not blaming my parents, because they did their best, or they didn't have the choices I had. I was exposed to a much different world than my parents, you know. So it's not looking for someone to blame. It's me taking responsibility for what I'm creating. And that don't want to do that. I'd rather find someone to even blame spirit, you know, like somebody else, get me out from under this human life where I have to take responsibility. And so the traumatized part was like, I don't like this dark part that I just discovered, and I want to get rid of it. And one of the things I've taught in one of my courses was to work with those monsters and transform them too, because they are created for us to protect us at that stage when you said you start to lie. So then you start to say, "Oh, I'm not like that, and I'm nice, and all this." And those monsters are there that were there originally to help us, and then become not so useful anymore. But the compassion comes from why were they created in the first place? Because we were not supported. So having compassion for that dark side, having compassion for that we created those monsters. They're not outside of us; they're in us, and so then he again can play with that, and really, that's one of the things I do is exaggerate it till it's ridiculous, or just love it till it just melts and it doesn't, or dissolve it, or and so it's hard to believe how much we are in charge of our own minds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this tendency to blame is so close to us,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
then as soon as we do that, there's this separation, and then it's a lot of work to come back to ourselves. And so it creates more problem, more tension, if we really lean into the blame.
Yeah, and our society again is a blaming, shaming society. And so, just going through all of that again is a temptation. It's kind of a temptation. And I think, you're saying about, how we met and so on, but you are so open yourself. That's why your gentle way is good for some people, because they don't feel defensive, and some people don't need that. Some people really need to feel your openness, and this openness is one of your gifts. That you're going to get hurt, yes, sometimes, but the openness is what's more important, and you're just opening and expanding. And I experience it because I've known you now for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost 20. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Oh, thank you for saying that. It definitely is. Yeah, it hurts, when it hurts a lot,
Yeah.
but it's so worth it, because the gifts and the ability to fully feel is how I can describe it. To me, is the greatest gift that I was able to reclaim about myself. Is, yeah, when it feels awful, it feels like really bad, but when it feels real, whether I interpret it as good or bad, that to me, there's no greater gift. It's like truth, and I'm like nowhere else but right here, right now, with what is happening. And I feel like I have access to everything like that I need. And for that, I need to be open. I need to allow all of it to move through me.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You referred to, asking Paul some things, and he told you some truth, and you weren't crazy about the truth. I did the same thing with my own partner. And he didn't waste words, but I can tell he's getting it from a divine source when I prefer that truth. Even when I get mad, I prefer it, that divine truth that comes through, and that's why I value him as a partner, is because I'm going to get the truth versus, well, this coffee doesn't taste so good. Well, that's relative truth, but, something authentic.
I love that so much. I didn't put the piece together where what was coming through him was actually truth, and that's why I didn't like it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. So, Nancy, to wrap up our conversation, even though I don't really want to, but what would you say to our listeners that is needed today Because I know a lot of people would say it's very polarized out there. There's a lot of feeling of separation, and there's this getting lost in the intense emotion, sometimes of helplessness and distress and despair. Maybe even connected to this new awareness of yours in the last couple of years. Like, what do you think people need to hear to help them navigate these times?
Well, I think your theme of trust is related to that, because if people learn to trust themselves more, it's inner work. It's really inner work. Just moving pieces around the chessboard instead of changing the board, changing the game. Because I think when we're trusting our authentic selves, we're trusting the universe. It's coming through us. And it is really hard to tell sometimes, because, you have all kinds of preferences of what you'd like. But that's what I think it is. If I go back to the theme of what we're talking about, and I've referred to transformation of monsters and so on, it's because of this alchemy term that you use. It's like, yes, we're the magicians.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it requires this coming back, always coming back to that inner space. And
yes. Yeah.
And then not looking outward for that guidance. Well, my friend, it's been amazing chatting with you today. I thank you so much for coming on the podcast and speaking with me today.
Well, this has been really enjoyable. I've really enjoyed it. Anytime we get a chance to talk, it's great.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful that you trust yourself, because the world's a much better place because you do.
Thank you.
On the street, they say that you don't care about me anymore, but it's in the way they walk, in the way they talk. I don't believe a thing they say. I love you anyway, anytime, any place. You mean the world to me, you mean everything to me. That's why I say, this is your life.